So the UFC Noche Fight Night is very soon. Obviously, the main event, we have Diego Lopes taking on Jean Silva. Overall, this card is pretty dead, I can't lie. Like, on paper anyway, hopefully the fights do deliver. You know, some fights even got cancelled, including the co-main event. Anyway, let's talk about that later. I'm not going to go through every single fight in my predictions, but at the end, I will show a screenshot of all my predictions. I'm just going to go through some of the main fights and some of the, fights I find interesting. Starting with Zachary Reese versus Cedric Dumas. Obviously, these guys are both not amazing. Cedric Dumas, I don't even know how he's allowed to fight after how many flipping convictions he's got. But anyway, that's besides the point. Both of these guys, decent records. Zachary Reese 9-2, Cedric Dumas 10-3. But, they have kind of lost to some pretty low-level opponents, if I'm being real. But I do think Zachary Reese just is a little bit better. Cedric Dumas, he's decent, but I don't think he's UFC worthy. I think he should just stick to the regional scene, to be honest. If he can get a nice KO over Zachary Reese, then maybe I'll change my mind about that. But for now, I got Zachary Reese by UD. Again, a very kind of similar matchup in terms of strengths and skills. These guys are both kind of the worst fighters in the middleweight division. I didn't actually think I could find someone that's worse than Jose Medina, but this guy might just be it. He's got a 12-6 record. Jose Medina 11-5, so not much better, to be honest. If you look at Jose Medina's record, he's never even won in the Contender Series, let alone the UFC. I don't know how he's even got in the UFC, let alone stayed in the UFC for 3 fights. But yeah, man, obviously in his last fight, he got brutally knocked out by Ateba Gautier. In terms of Todorovic, he has been fighting in the UFC since 2020, so he has actually had quite a lot of fights in the organization, obviously losing most of them. It's actually kind of mad to think that this guy came into the organization undefeated as a 9-0 or 10-0 prospect, I guess you could call him. And yeah, he's kind of gone off the rails now, but he has lost his last 3 fights as well. One of them was to Zachary Reese as well, so yeah, man. I'm going to go for Jose Medina, but I can't count on either of these guys to get a decent win here. Next up, Alexander Hernandez versus Diego Ferreira. To be honest, I don't know why this fight is so low down on the card. I think it could definitely be the featured fight or even the co-main. But yeah, Alexander Hernandez, he used to be a big prospect within the UFC. Then he got, humbled by Donald Cerrone. Since then, he's kind of gone on a long win-loss streak. Fighting the likes of Drew Dober, getting finished by him. Also got finished by Moicano. He has a win over Jim Miller, but in 2023, that's not exactly an amazing feat. But now, notably, he is on a 3-fight win streak, including a pretty good KO against Chase Hooper in the first round, just under a month ago. So he's coming back very quickly, which is good to see, I guess. Diego Ferreira, kind of an older guy, but he's definitely a very well-established lightweight fighter within the UFC. He is coming off of a loss against Grant Dawson by UD, but Grant Dawson is no joke, man. He is actually a good fighter. He did have a cancelled bout against Bobby Green. He would have butchered Bobby Green if we're being real. But before he lost to Grant Dawson, he did actually go on a 2-fight win streak against Michael Johnson and Mateusz Rambecki. We know those 2 guys are very solid. Those 2 wins have aged very well, I would say. Or not very well, I'll say pretty well. So, who have I got to win this? Obviously, it's the young'un versus the veteran. I would probably go for Alexander Hernandez to get this one done. I think, as of recently, he's been looking better, and obviously he's more active. Diego Ferreira hasn't even fought for almost a year now. Or not, maybe not a year, maybe like 8-9 months. So, I think age is on his side. A lot of factors are on his side, so I'm going to go for Alexander Hernandez. Maybe by KO, Now moving on to Kelvin Gastelum versus Dustin Stoltzfus. A few years ago, a win over Dustin Stoltzfus was basically, or a fight against him was basically a free win. But I think since then he's actually become a bit better. Obviously, Kelvin Gastelum, he's been in many legendary fights. Of course, he's knocked out Michael Bisping. He's had a crazy fight with Adesanya. He's had his fair share of losses, you have to say it, man. He obviously lost to Till, lost to Jack Hermansson, Whittaker, Cannonier, and since then he hasn't really got any good wins. I mean, he has a win over Chris Curtis. Last year he had a win over D-Rod, which is again not an amazing win, but in his last fight against Joe Pyfer, again, he didn't even really look that good, to be honest. I think this is a big step down, though, very big step down against Dustin Stoltzfus. who in his last fight he did lose against Ruzy Boy, but before that he actually knocked out Marc-Andre Barriot, which is actually a pretty good win. But apart from that, his record isn't amazing. He actually does have a slam injury against Joe Pyfer, which is kind of crazy, but apart from that, nothing special. So, to be honest, I'm just going to go. This is at middleweight as well. You need to factor that. I'll probably go Kevin Gastelum by unanimous decision, maybe even a split decision. You never know. It's going to be one of them fights. Next up on this card, we have Rafa Garcia versus Jared Gordon. Both guys kind of, I wouldn't want to say gatekeepers, but both pretty established fighters within the lightweight division. Obviously, Jared Gordon, he's famous for that Paddy Pimblett robbery. Obviously, he did win that fight and he got robbed. But recently, he's been looking decent. In his last fight, he did get a KO against Thiago Moises. He had a split decision loss against Nasrat Haqparast, which was a very close fight. Even before that, he had a TKO against Mark Madsen. So yeah, very good recently, and of course he's just like a very solid fighter. Rafa Garcia, again, pretty decent. I reckon these guys are around the same, kind of skill level. Rafa Garcia, recently fighting against Vink Pitchell, or however the Ross you pronounce his name, and he did get a unanimous decision. Recently, the only losses he's had are against Drakkar Klose and Grant Dawson, but he has also lost to Nasrat Haqparast. I think recently, just of recency, I would have to go for Rafa Garcia. I think he's better right now. I'm going to go him by UD. Next up, the co-main event between Rob Font and David Martinez. Obviously, this fight was originally supposed to be Rob Font versus Raul Rosas, but he had to pull out, so now we got this fight. On short notice, this is a pretty good kind of matchup, but obviously, David Martinez only ever had one fight within the UFC, and it was a very good performance against Simon Oliveira, TKO in the first round in March earlier this year. But I think Rob Font's too good for him, man. Obviously, number 9 ranked. He's been a ranked guy for a long time within the division. Obviously, recently he did get a win against Kyler Phillips, I think. Yeah, recently he got a win against Kyler Phillips and then Jin Matsumoto, which are 2 very decent wins. Obviously, he's had his fair share of losses, but I think like if it's not a really high level opponent, I think he kind of just steamrolls them. We saw that against Kyler Phillips. So yeah, I'm gonna go for Rob Font here by unanimous decision. And finally, of course, the main event, the fight that carries this card absolutely, Diego Lopes versus Jean Silva. I can't lie, for a Noche, card, this is a terrible card. Obviously, it was supposed to be the pay-per-view, but then Dana White decided to cancel it because of Canelo versus Terence Crawford. But anyway, let's talk about this main event. Diego Lopes, obviously, in his last fight, he did lose by unanimous decision against Volkanovski in that title fight, but he did have some very good, moments in that fight. He knocked down Volkanovski, and he almost won the fight, but I think Jean Silva is just way too skilled, bro. I know he is number 10 ranked, and he hasn't really proven himself against crazy levels of opponent. The best guy he's beaten is literally, what's his name, Bryce Mitchell, who's gone down to bantamweight since. So, but this will be a very good test for him. I think he deserves it for sure. And this is the real test for him. Obviously, he's had 5-6 fights within the UFC now, and I think all of them have come by way of finish. This guy is literally a finishing machine, and he is one of the most entertaining fighters. If you watch that fight against Bryce Mitchell live, you'll know, like, bro, that fight was so entertaining. And obviously, when he got that submission against one of the best submission guys in the division, that was just crazy. So, yeah, man, obviously, Diego Lopes, he is really legit as well on the ground and on the feet. We saw him piece at Brian Ortega. We saw him, he's very good on the bottom as well, for submissions and stuff. We saw that against Movsar Evloev in his debut on short notice, I think it was as well. So that's kind of crazy. But I think Jean Silva, if he is as good as, we think he is, if he's not a fraud like like 2 of the other ones that lost last week. No, I'm joking. I don't think they're frauds. But yeah, I think Jean Silva, I think he's the most legit out of all of them. And he is the most likely to become champion. Him and Carlos Paraches are really, really legit. But yeah, I think Jean Silva, I genuinely think he might actually steamroll Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes, he's very unpredictable, very quick, but then again, so is Jean Silva. That's literally the definition of Jean Silva. So yeah, I'm gonna go for Jean Silva here, probably by a finish, maybe a submission actually, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully Jean Silva wins as well. That would be amazing for the division. We can see him in title contention after this. I mean, obviously there's like three big contenders right now for the title. Obviously the winner of this fight, Movsar and Leron Murphy. So we'll see what happens, but that's about it. So here is the list for all of my predictions on this card. You guys let me know what you think of my predictions, what you think of this fight night. If you agree, disagree, in the comment section down below. Please do like, comment, share, subscribe. Turn on that post notification bell so you get notified every time I upload. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys next time. Safe.